It's the OG master of passive aggression and as hard to kill as, well, a cockroach. It is CRH00 Bad Hacker, coming to the game with a kit of field repair, shoot trap, melee trap, biped legs, and the leg ability of B-loader, which buffs the evade stat of the legs relative to your metaforce charge. Now, it is nice to see Bad Hacker as an officially pullable gacha model, as prior to this we actually have seen him numerous times as an enemy NPC in particular, but all the same, Bad Hacker's mastery on the field isn't necessarily outward or outright aggression, but more is the mastery of passive aggression. Field Repair is simply a healing skill that will heal all four parts, or all active parts rather, relative to the leg's mastery on the particular terrain. So of course, terrains with A rank or S rank means that you're going to get the best and most efficient healing possible with that particular skill. Shoot trap and melee trap, very easy to explain, very self-explanatory. You'll set a plant on the enemy field, and anytime that they trigger a particular trap, shooting skills for shoot trap, melee skills for melee trap, it will automatically damage them for a small amount of damage, roughly in the about 1000s, but I have seen it go higher every time they trigger it. And the number of charges that the plant gets is of course relative to the rank of the part itself. So 3-star will give you a 3-charge plant, 5-star will give you a 5-charge plant before it expires. So right across the board, honestly, and quite surprisingly, but rather not kind of expected of his motif, Bad Hacker as a cockroach type is pretty tough to kill. About 3300 HP for the head, about 30, 50, almost 3100 per arm, about 3600 for his legs. But honestly, let's talk about those leg stats for a second, because as much as he is as a pain to kill, you know, true to his motive as a cockroach, but the stats also make him almost impossible to even touch, let alone even try to land a hit on him. Melee resist of about 1008 really isn't too bad, kind of in that nice sweet zone you want to be in. Shoot resist of 945 leaves a little bit to be desired, but probably not enough to really warrant it as a danger or a potential threat. But let's look at that evade and that mobility for a second. An evade of 1915. This honestly puts it on the same tier as high-end flight legs, or even flight legs or sea legs, and in some cases even puts it on par with some meta changes that transform to get higher evade stats. So right off the bat, Bad Hacker's primary role in the field isn't necessarily to tank hits. Rather, it's his skill to simply put a trap down and then slink away where nobody can touch him. And with the mobility of 823 too, he's got some very solid mobility on any field, even if he has the complete inability to equip any heavy parts. And that's also not even touching on his leg ability, which buffs his evade even higher relative to the amount of metaforce charge that he sustains. Now, of course, because Bad Hacker does not have any particular metaforce reliant parts between any of his traps or his fields or his repair skill, that does make kind of using him for that skill just a little tricky and more of an added bonus more than something to actually rely on. However, despite this, Bad Hacker is also fully capable of a Medachange form, where he is able to completely change up his kit almost entirely and trade his passive aggression for outright aggression to a degree, where he changes his leg type to multi, his leg ability to carrier, which chances for negative ailments to be passed along to target when attacking, but he also exchanges shoot and melee trap for bug and virus. So now he has the ability to not just instigate passive aggression with either of his traps, but he also is capable of now instilling turn skip on foes if he's able to outrun them. But given the fact that none of his drives require metaforce charge to sustain or use, he can honestly switch between either of these forms very efficiently and very easy almost every other turn to the point, which makes his viability on the field even more so of a threat. And even harder to kill, again, true to his motif as a cockroach type. Bug and virus, as mentioned, are simply turn skip ailments that if you catch a foe in their heat phase and outrun them, it will basically waste their turn by the time they get to the command line. But it's honestly the leg ability of carrier while this form that also really does tie into his motif and how dangerous he can be as a source of passive aggression on the field, as any kind of ailments that Bad Hacker himself is afflicted with, such as say melt, virus, or even deathlock in some cases. Whenever he attacks, like when he changes form, he has a chance to pass that ailment on to an attacker, almost as if to say, you afflicted with me, go ahead and try to inflict me with something, I dare you. And even on that, his already high leg stats go even higher, with about 1152 for both his shoot and his melee resist, which kind of rounds him out in that field just a little bit. An evade of 2097, almost 2100, not as high as a buff per se, but honestly it's more his mobility that gets the buff in this case, for going from about 830 something to about 877, which is definitely much more noticeable, especially if you do plan to use him for more consistent passive aggression across the field, as is what he's denoted and built for. As a pure set score for these reasons, I do have to rate Bad Hacker a pretty solid 7.5 out of 10 for what he can offer. He is pretty much the OG master of passive aggression, since he can set down both melee or shoot traps pretty much at will. Granted, of course, putting one trap down will override the other one, but since it pretty much sets the trap at the highest amount of charges possible, this can pretty much be done on the fly between his turns, with pretty solid heat and cool across the board between either of those. And the ability to heal himself slightly, or at least heal some HP to all parts with field repair, also does kind of add to his overall viability and survivability, and then of course getting access to bug and virus for turn skipping when he is in change mode. As mixed parts, however, I do have to rate him just a little bit lower at a 6.5 out of 10, primarily for the fact that while shoot trap and melee trap can be particularly dangerous if you use them right, their overall viability on the field does leave a little bit to be desired, and using Bad Hacker as mixed parts does kind of take away from his overall viability on the field, since a lot of his talent comes from being able to switch between robot mode and Medachange mode very quickly, and very easily to change up the role that he needs in battle.